央电视台总部新大楼自从设计方案确定，就引起社会大众广泛的关注，出现了很多质疑的声音。央视新大楼的设计者是建筑师瑞姆·库哈斯及其创建的大都会建筑公司。本节目特别邀请了库哈斯合伙人之一的奥雷舍人接受我们的访问。奥雷舍人1995年加入大都会建筑事务所，是一位经验丰富的建筑师，目前负责中央电视台大楼和北京新华书店大楼项目的设计工作。
Because your office is quite notable for your radical design works, but do you have some similar projects beside the CCTV tower?
So we've actually been looking at tall buildings for a long time. We studied concepts in the mid-90s for a 1 kilometer tall structure, the Hyper building in Bangkok. But we also formulated concepts such as bigness as an architectural strategy.
So when you do this CCTV tower design, is it a great opportunity or you think it's a big challenge for your office?
OMA has never really limited itself to a single style or a single building typology. So in that sense, every project we've regarded as an opportunity and as a challenge. As a challenge also to a building typology, to question the status of a typology at a given point in time in society, and to possibly reinvent or reformulate the elements that ultimately compose such a building typology. So CCTV is certainly part of that culture of investigation, and certainly it is a challenging project, and at that scale I think undeniably as being one of the largest buildings ever built in the world would be so for everyone.
So now everybody familiar with the shape of the building, the big loop. Could you explain where this idea comes from and what is the main concept for that?
CCTV is a tube folded in space of interconnected activities. The idea was to create a building that would unite all elements of television making in a single structure and inscribe them into an order of a collaborative system. So it is a loop that summons administration, news, broadcasting, program production and research and training facilities into a single whole, and allows the organization not only to represent itself as a whole, but actually also to operate as one closed organism, if you like.
Everybody will say there's a lot of ways to organize two towers together, for instance, a bridge or so on. And your loop obviously caused a lot of difficulties on the structure. So did you ever think of other solutions, or this is the solution from the first?
No, we certainly investigated a whole range of other solutions, a single tower or twin towers, or also campus-like arrangements of buildings on this 20-hectare site. In the end, we felt that there was a real correlation between the shape and the organizational structure, because it is not two linear systems that are connected at a single point, but it's actually a circular system that ultimately offers completely different possibilities for its usage, but also its spatial configuration.
But I just wonder, did you realize the structural difficulties from the very beginning?
We obviously were very aware of those, and we always collaborate with our engineers from the very outset of the projects. So during the competition, we were already working with the engineers from Over Arup in close collaboration on really speculating how a building like this could not only function in terms of its architecture but also its structure. So I think it is a true hybrid between, and a kind of very successful marriage between two domains. And what is maybe also important to say is that while the structure is certainly challenging, it is also truly innovative and actually very efficient in many ways. If you compare it to other buildings, the steel tonnage per square meter, which is a sort of rate of efficiency, there's buildings in the near vicinity just across the road, Beijing Television, that are almost twice as high in their steel consumption. So this net, this tube of a triangulated diagrid that spans the building and that forms this tube folded in space and actually brings all the forces to its surface has become a highly optimized and actually highly efficient structure.
So I'm curious, your engineer would at first say it is efficient structure, or he would think, oh, this is something like really rare to see or something like that?
It is certainly something rare to see, and again, we have always been interested in investigating new conditions and pushing the boundaries of where a profession or thinking had been limited to. But again, it is precisely this moment of questioning if a structure, for example, should be merely defined in horizontal and vertical forces that are then stabilized by a secondary system for shifts against each other, to actually take that secondary system and declare it the primary structure of the building.
So you are actually saying like this structure is actually more stable than a single tower?
It's in many ways also more stable. During the process of design and engineering, we have collaborated not only with our partner office and engineers from ECADI based in Shanghai, but also we've been engaged in an intense dialogue with an expert panel set up by the Chinese authorities, a panel consisting of the 13 most senior structural engineers of the country that from the outset of the design defined design criteria and assessed the process of design and ultimately approved the structure as feasible and fully safe in January 2004. So, and this process has been a very, very intense and a very rigorous one. The structure has been tested in conditions where several elements can be eliminated and the overall structure remains fully intact. And actually just last Sunday we completed the shaking table test of the structure in Beijing. A model was constructed almost 8 meters tall at a scale of 1 to 35, 64 tons heavy, and it was tested against different intensities of earthquake, and it actually survived an earthquake that has the likelihood of appearing in 2,500 years. So it is a structure now tested and known to the largest possible extent, really.
So by the way, could you tell us how big actually the foundation is, the structure for the foundation is?
The foundations obviously span the entire footprint of the building. So it is really this square of 3 by 300 meter that I described before, but each tower, where the two towers come down to the ground, has a specific kind of foot. Basically they rest on a concrete slab of approximately 100 by 100 meters that form 2 feet that disperse the pressure of the towers into the ground.
But how deep is that foundation?
The raft itself is about 10 to 12 meters thick, and below that are the piles that we mentioned before of about 35 meter depth.
Another question is, you have that cantilever part for the building. Do you ever worry like people, how the people feel in or under this structure or in that structure?
There will certainly be a feeling of tension, but also a feeling of excitement, I think. It is truly a moment that illustrates that things can go maybe further than the expected.
OMA 的领导人库哈斯毕业于英国伦敦建筑学院，曾担任记者和电影剧作者，近30岁才从事建筑设计工作。早期被认为是一个充满叛逆的幻想家，他的很多作品充满了一种颠覆性的想象力，极具现代感和反叛意识。
Obviously, you also know that we have lots of people talking on the internet. One thing I think is quite interesting is they all feel like this design is against the G-force. What is the purpose for doing that? Because you know a loop can be many kinds, but especially for that kind of loop, what is the purpose for that?
It was again the interest of generating a loop that would not be two-dimensional but actually three-dimensional, and to define and engage space in a particular way. But you can obviously look at this shape and this building in many ways. You can look at it as something that is protruding forward, but you could also look at it as something that is actually carved out of a larger and more stable mass. And you can describe it in many different terms. Ultimately, there is a balance both between stability and instability in the structure that I think is absolutely critical for what the building is, as it ranges in many ways between extremes or between hybrids, between stable and unstable, between maybe future and past. And I think it is this dialogue and the tension between those polar aspects that ultimately create the richness of the project also.
It's interesting. But frankly, do you realize from beginning, like in Beijing, especially in the earthquake zone, this structure would cause a huge cost, like people says? We were very aware of where we were building. I think both culturally but also technologically, certainly vis-à-vis the fact that Beijing is earthquake zone. So these were all considerations that were present from the outset of the design and not late discoveries. And again, the way the structural system was developed as an integral part to the architecture really reflects that. The building is certainly taking a step forward. It is attempting to do something that hasn't been done like this before, and that always means that a huge effort is needed to do that. People's interest is needed to do that, and people's investment both in time and other quantitative terms is ultimately required in order to make things progress. It is very easy to repeat things that have been done many times before and to commit yourself to the maintenance of a stable configuration, but it is actually a much larger challenge to engage in imagining a future and new possibilities. Do you have the confidence that the project will actually accepted by all the people, or Chinese or all around the world?
I think the moment the project will be built, it will manifest its own reality, as architecture does in such a moment very often. And also when you ask the question, will it be accepted by Chinese people or will it be something Chinese? Certainly what is happening now, everything of what is happening now is Chinese, because it is in China and it will be the new reality of China and ultimately also symbolize China.